Corey Lewandowski going at it last night with Chris Cuomo on Primetime CNN. And he's with us right now, back by popular demand, Encore Performance. Corey, great to have you, man.
It is always great to be back with you, John. Much, much better than being with Chris. You know that.
I know, especially the next time I'm on with him, I don't care what opportunity I get, I'm going to say, hey, what about the comment your brother made about America was really never great? Do you share that view, Chris? I'd love to get his take on that. Right?
Well, look, John, there's a couple things that nobody wants to talk about. And look, I actually have a fine relationship with Chris, to be honest with you. Yeah. I don't agree with him politically on anything, but he has not raised the issue of his brother's comments, which were clearly a major, major gaffe and took him days to walk back. And the other thing that nobody else in the mainstream media has talked about is his taped conversation with Michael Cohen, which we have been told lasted hours. And that recording has not been released because my guess is a number of the people who Michael Cohen has on tape are people from the media, and they will be embarrassed if those tapes come out. And not one question about those tapes with Michael Cohen last night.
We understand that tape with Chris Cuomo is like 2 hours or something. I mean, it's a very long conversation as what is leaked out, right? So it's a very long time. We'll have to see what plays out. We're with Corey Lewandowski, former campaign manager for the Donald Trump campaign, also author of the best book on the campaign written, Let Trump Be Trump. He's got another book coming out around Thanksgiving, right? Or earlier?
That's right. It's called Trump's Enemies. It is going to talk about those people who have stopped his agenda from going forward from inside the administration. Some are people who worked in the White House. Some are people who worked in government agencies. But all of them were government employees, and they were trying to stop and have continued to try and stop the America First Trump agenda from going forward. And some of them have had perches as career government officials, and I can think of people like Jim Comey and Clapper and those guys, to individuals that you will know better who have worked in the White House who tried to stop his agenda. That book's going to come out in November. We're going to name names, we're going to talk about it, and we're going to show, regardless of how much they have tried to stop his agenda, just how successful this president has been in the first almost 2 years in office now.
I mean, it's been pretty incredible. And you're going to name names, and it's people that are still in there now, right?
Well, that's right, John. I mean, look, just because you're still working in the government doesn't give you a pass. And because I'm not a government employee, I'm happy to outline to the American people those individuals who are stopping the Trump agenda from being successful. It's important, and people need to know it.
Trump's Enemies from Within coming on at Thanksgiving. This is going to be a blockbuster because it's going to really shake things up. Okay, we got a lot to go over here in a few minutes. Corey, we're going to go rapid fire. Let's get to number one, security clearance revocations, starting with John Brennan. What did you make of that, and what about going forward?
Look, John, no person has articulated to me why John Brennan continues to need a security clearance. If you watch Meet the Press this Sunday, which I happen to do, he said, well, it could hurt people if they're sitting on boards, corporate boards, because they get paid more money. Look, it's a profiteering opportunity for some people to keep their security clearances. We know John Brennan is never going to be consulting with this administration on issues of national security, and if he needs a security clearance in the future, he can reapply like everybody else. He is no better than anybody else. He should lose his security clearance, and anybody who is leaving the government who has no longer had a reason to keep their security clearance should have either theirs revoked or allow it to expire, because these expire. And just because he's had one for 38 years doesn't give you the privilege and honor to keep that in place.
Right, because what they do with these is they turn it into cash, right? By sitting on corporate boards that John Brennan talked about, or by very lucrative consulting gigs on Wall Street or K Street or Goldman Sachs or lawyer firms, lobbying firms. I mean, they get more money for doing it. And really their job was to serve the people, serve the government. When they get out, I don't understand why they have them. They need to get up and go get a real job like everybody else. I mean, this is the stuff in the pig trough, Corey, in the swamp that working people are sick of.
Well, Well, that's exactly right. And the other thing that they do, and the reason they want to keep these security clearances, is so that they can pick up the phone and they can call their buddies at the CIA or the DIA or the DOD or wherever they have their clearance from and get information that they can then share with corporate entities. And because they have the clearance, it's legal. Now that John Brennan has that clearance revoked, he can't have those conversations because revealing classified information to a person who doesn't have a security clearance is a felony. And this now goes to show, look, Sally Yates, Jim Comey, Andrew McCabe, we can go right down the list. Individuals who should no longer have security clearances because they were fired from their position in some cases, or I guess in those three, in all three cases, have been fired from their jobs, should no longer have security clearances. That should be a fact, and they shouldn't be allowed to profiteer after.
Okay, let's move on, and I agree with that 100%. Rudy Giuliani going off the rails. Look, I've been a major critic of him going on TV. I think, Corey, honestly, every time the former mayor gets on TV, it gets worse. The other day saying, well, truth isn't the truth. What the hell is he talking about?
Look, I had the privilege of spending some time with Mayor Giuliani over the weekend as the stories of Don McGahn were breaking. And look, where Mayor Giuliani is, you have to remember, he's relatively new to the team. This legal team was brought up with John Dowd and Ty Cobb, and I think by and large, they did a partial disservice to the president by not exerting privilege on some of the things they should have, by thinking that cooperating with the Mueller investigators was going to expedite this case. It clearly hasn't. And now Mayor Giuliani is up to speed on what's going on. But you have to remember, John, what the media wants to do to Mayor Giuliani is they want to get him to say something that becomes the soundbite. They don't want to listen to what he's trying to articulate, which is, even if you tell the truth, that truth is subjective to some people. And he specifically used the case of former General Mike Flynn, who told Peter Strzok what he believed to be the truth. And Peter Strzok believed at the time that Mike Flynn was telling the truth and that he wasn't lying. And then that story has then since changed. Strzok has since changed his mind, and now Mike Flynn has been charged with lying and lying to the FBI and is now a convicted felon.
I mean, it's unbelievable. But still, I mean, maybe when you talk to the mayor, why can't you just tell him to get off the TV for a while? Because I don't see where it's being helpful. Every time he can. And look,
John, you do need people, and I think the president needs people who are on TV pushing back against a fake narrative that many outlets want to continue to perpetuate, because Rudy Giuliani has been someone who's on TV fighting back for the president, outlining the legal case. I saw Judge Mukasey on last night on CNN. He did a phenomenal job of outlining, as an attorney and a former judge, why you would not recommend to your client to go and sit down with the Mueller team, which is the smart decision, in my opinion. I'm not an attorney,
right,
but that's the same advice I would give. And we need those individuals who are out from a legal side talking about this case, and Rudy Giuliani has information that candidly none of us have as it relates to this case and what they're trying to accomplish. I think it's important for him to keep talking honestly.
Okay, Don McGahn, 30 hours of testimony. Seemed some people inside the White House team were surprised by that. What's the deal with that, Corey?
Well, look, from what the reports are now, the testimony that Don gave to the Mueller investigators took place in November, December, and January. And so I do call into question why we're just learning about that now, 8 months later. Was that leaked from the Mueller investigators to try and put pressure on President Trump to testify or to come and sit down and have a conversation? I don't know the answer. But what is more disturbing is this notion that at least the initial conversation, nobody went and exerted what could have been presidential privilege through the White House counsel and through documents, and now through Reince Priebus as the chief of staff. The previous legal team did not exert what could have been considered a privilege from the President of the United States. And I think that was a mistake. This legal team, Emmett Flood, Rudy Giuliani, I know that when Bob Mueller's team has now asked to sit down with John Kelly, they have exerted privilege on that, and that has not moved forward. Because what we have seen is you are required, John, to sit down and tell the truth if you are subpoenaed to do so. And if you are asked to do so, it is up to you as an individual with your counsel to decide if you're going to sit down and do that or you're going to be subpoenaed. And once Don McGahn walked into that office and sat down with the Mueller investigators, by law and as an officer of the court and an attorney in the White House counsel, he absolutely is going to tell the truth every single time. And the question becomes, did President Trump believe that he had attorney-client privilege with Don McGahn while in his capacity as White House counsel? Mm-hmm. And if so, were any of those conversations relayed to the Mueller investigators, which would have breached attorney-client privilege? I don't think so, but the White House legal team could have done things differently if they wanted to. In hindsight, now is 2020, and these conversations that took place, from what we're being told and what's being publicly available, ended back in January of this year, so some 8 months ago now.
So your contention is the same as mine, that it seemed odd that the White House court team was taken a little back by this. And certainly if the new team was in there, I don't think that level of cooperation, if you want to call it, or 30 hours of testimony would have ever happened. I mean, 30 hours, Corey, you've been under testimony, so have I. Not at the same scale, but 30 hours, that's a long time. I mean, that is a long time. That's a day and a half.
John, it's an amazing amount of time, and traditionally, when you're in that environment, it's obviously a stressful environment.
Yes.
You're sitting there for, and in this case, it seems to be 10 hours at a time on 3 different occasions, trying to recall every single thing you've ever done and said to make sure that you're not lying because you want to be as truthful as possible. And I go back and question, again, the strategy of the previous legal team to make decisions which are now coming back to potentially call into question why that strategy was placed. John Dowd and Ty Cobb said that it was their desire to end the investigation. These are the same individuals who told us that the Mueller investigation was going to end by last Thanksgiving,
right,
and then by Christmas, and then by New Year. And you fast forward now, 9 or 10 more months after that, and the investigation is still going. And so their strategy was fundamentally flawed. And as the President of the United States, they could have, and I'm not an attorney, exerted a privilege that the White House legal counsel, who is an attorney and represents the office of the President, would have or could have potentially been excluded from giving testimony to the Mueller investigators, but they chose to play nice, thinking it was going to help them, and it's gotten them nothing.
Absolutely nothing, and you're 100% there. It has gotten them nothing. And right, you got to recall back with the former White House legal team telling us that it would be over by Thanksgiving of last year, then Christmas. And here it is, the summer going into the midterms. We still haven't. There's no end in sight whatsoever. Corey, Arizona Senate primary coming up. This is one of those swing states that the Republicans have to hold. Do you have a choice in that Senate primary?
I have not made an endorsement. The President has not made an endorsement. The Vice President has not made an endorsement in that Senate primary, which comes up on the 28th of the month. So we've got a week to go in that. But what is critical, and I am sure what will occur, is immediately following, and I say immediately, maybe a week, maybe 10 days, 2 weeks, something of that time frame, you're going to see whoever the Republican nominee is, whether it's McSally, whether it's Ward, or whether it's Arpaio, they're going to have the full support of the administration to go down there and campaign for them. This is a seat that's absolutely critical for not only keeping but expanding our Republican majorities in the U.S. Senate. So after the election, a week from today, I think what you'll find is the President, the Vice President, and the outside entities that are supporting the Trump-Pence agenda will be actively campaigning in Arizona. I think you'll see them spending a lot of time down there between Labor Day and Election Day in that 60-day window, and it's a critical race, but there are many others. It just so happens that this one is really the most competitive Republican primary. You've got 3 very good candidates in the race with no clear front runner, and this race could change on a dime with a week to go.
McSally is the favorite, but the poll numbers there have been all over the place. We've seen these upsets come in the past, and everybody's underestimating Joe Arpaio's popularity there. So we don't really know what's going to happen here, but I like what you're saying. Look, at the end of the day, they've got to come together. But it sounds like you're not going to see a election night tweet of endorsement by the president for one of these candidates. Would that be your assessment?
Well, John, I can tell you anybody who tells you that they know what the president's going to tweet is just not an honest person. But I think based on previous conversations, that there are three very good and qualified candidates in this race. The people of Arizona are going to have to make the decision of who they want to represent them in the U.S. Senate come January of next year. I believe that the president and the vice president and our groups are going to wait for the people of Arizona to speak in that primary and then fully support whoever that individual is that comes through next Tuesday night.
All right. Midterm assessment. Steve Bannon told the Associated Press over the weekend, he said if the election were held today, the Democrats would pick up, he said, 35 to 45 seats if it were held today. But he said, look, we still have 70 days. Where do we stand now? What is Corey Lewandowski's take on the House today?
John, we're 11 weeks from the election, I think, so we're about 77 days from today is the election. Where my take is the generic ballot right now, if you look at that, which is a very good indicator, has the Democrats with an advantage, and they've maintained that advantage. It was a much bigger advantage in January. It got much closer, and now it's widened a little bit. I think we're in the doldrums of the summer, and what you're going to find is come Labor Day, which is the traditional start of the fall, people are going to be back to focusing on what's important, and you're going to see Republicans winning in districts that they're not supposed to. It's going to be a very close election to the House.
All right, so if you were to handicap it now, do the Republicans hang on, yes or no?
If the election were held today,
yes.
I think it's literally within two to three seats of the Republicans keeping the majority.
I have the exact same assessment, and we've not, just so our audience knows, we have not collaborated on this at all.
There's no collusion, John.
It's
There's no
not
collaboration.
collusion.
There's no coordination on that decision, right, between us? Don't let anybody get us into trouble. We agree on that.
That's right. There is no collusion. Although we do talk every day, we haven't talked about this.
Correct.
Corey Lewandowski, thanks for being with us. Appreciate you. Buy his book, Let Trump Be Trump. Go to Amazon or your favorite bookstore.